Poet Beats.
Greetings, beloved. This is Rev Michael Malcom with the People's Justice Council, as well as Alabama Interfaith Power and Life. And today we have with us the Rev Dr Dave Barnhart of St. Junia, UMC. That's UMC, United Methodist Church. And today we're talking about creation care. And Dr. Dave Barnhart, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good, good. So if you would, just give us a glimpse of why it is that you do what you do. Well, first, let's talk about what you do.
Yeah, sure.
And your motto of ministry. And then let's talk about why it is that you do what you do and your care for people and planet.
Sure. Right. So I'm pastor of St. Junia, United Methodist Church. We're a network of house churches, and we've been doing that for about 4 years. The reason I think house churches are important, not only do they go back to the first century, the first churches were all house churches, but I think they represent a sort of decentralized, grassroots, community organizing model of church. Today, the model of church that dominates our world is much more hierarchical, top-down, and I even like to compare it to sort of factory farming. You have, the whole idea was to get big, to create market share or mind share, to win lots of converts, and this notion of bigness and efficiency drove the church to this corporate model of how we do ministry. So the goal in starting a church, so I was a church planner. I was told the first goal of a church planner is to put butts in seats. The second goal is to put more butts in more seats. And there is truth in that, but I think that the model that we have that is focused on let's essentially create a business that'll support a full-time clergy person means that for so long, especially in the 94% white United Methodist Church, that we've said, well, we know where we can plant a sustainable church, and that's to go plant it in white suburbs. And so the model of church planting is, because it's hierarchical, because it's based on this marketing version of evangelism, means that it's also inherently racist, it's also inherently capitalist, it's also inherently takes part in the exploitation of the planet. So that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's a lot to weave into a model of ministry, especially when our whole society is rigged against grassroots, decentralized, that kind of growth, that kind of life. So
yeah, I mean, it's countercultural, but wasn't that what Christ was?
Yes,
I mean,
right.
wasn't Christ
right.
countercultural?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even when Christ goes in and kicks over tables and beats the money changers out of temples, wasn't that him being countercultural?
Absolutely.
Because they had set up big business in the church,
right?
And that big business divided the haves from the have-nots.
Absolutely. Well, the other thing he did, one of the reasons the church spread so quickly was because he recruited. They had women leaders. When you look at Paul's letters, most of the people he's addressing are women.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, I don't know how it got wrestled out of the hands of Scripture, this whole model of men running everything and being this dominant.
Right.
When, as a matter of fact, if you read Luke, I mean, Luke is extremely exceptional in highlighting the role of women in ministry and just how vital and important they were. Matter of fact, had we not had women at that time and in their role that they were in ministry, we wouldn't even know the gospel.
Right, absolutely.
They were the first carriers.
Absolutely.
And
right.
it's a crazy, crazy thing to me when I hear, this whole discrimination against women in ministry or women in leadership roles, period.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say it, and it may not be politically correct, it may not sound right, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't understand how we have not ran to women for the solutions. because men have just been jacking stuff up for so long.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, well, I can't. And I'm not endorsing any candidate because I can't do that. But when Hillary Clinton ran, I just don't understand how we didn't just flock to say, okay, solve this for us.
Right. When you look at the responses to COVID-19, the countries that have done the best have women in their positions of top authority.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
so we named our church St. Junia because Junia is the only named female apostle in the Bible. So it's in Romans 16:7, Paul says, greet Andronicus and Junia, they were first among the apostles.
Yes.
And so, people who have said women can't be in ministry miss the fact that he puts her right along there with Peter and James and John and the rest of them. So, yeah.
I mean, the Gospels just clearly show the role of women, and I don't know how we got on this whole women thing, but I'm loving how we're here. You know?
Sure.
But the Gospel it completely shows the role of women. It wasn't until church history that they took women out of ministry and put up mandates of men being. But at the same time, they were putting up these mandates. They were also keeping men of the African churches from being a part of the council.
Yeah.
That decided how this whole thing was set up in the first place. And so,
it's part of our history too. I mean, the whole thing is part of it. Yeah, absolutely.
When you look at it, it's just, there's always been this taken away. And today it's the same way. I don't understand, and for the life of me, how we politicize something like a disease, or how we politicize something like our planet being in the trouble that it's in. Listening at the various rhetoric of last week and this week, I find it sad that our home is burning.
Yeah, right.
And we aren't discussing this with the same fervorance as we discuss some of the other stuff that we discuss. Our collective home, not just my home, not just your home, but our collective. Looking at the various talking platforms that have come by in the last few days and listening at what's been said, though there's been some talk about the planet.
Yeah.
One, it hadn't been consistent, and secondly, it hadn't been dealt with this sense of urgency that we know it needs to be dealt with.
Right.
I remember my first time meeting you. Well, I take that back. The first time I encountered you was at the E.J. Bradford press conference thing. I had just gotten to Birmingham, and because I knew T, she just threw me right on in.
Right.
But then the second time I remember us meeting was at the UMC, or the United Methodist Church conference.
Right.
And there you were trying to pass some resolutions. Could you tell me about those resolutions?
I was really focused on, just to share, it didn't really bother me if they passed or not. What I was trying to do was illustrate something, which is that right now the United Methodist Church is about to split ostensibly over gay and lesbian issues. So General Conference hasn't happened yet, but there's a lot of talk about, is the UMC going to stay together or is it going to separate? And so the focus has been on gay and lesbian issues, but that's not really what the issue is. The issue really is how Christianity has been hijacked by the far right to support an agenda that just privileges a very few. So I introduced several resolutions. One was completely in line with our Book of Discipline that was about, in 2006, the North Alabama Conference passed a resolution supporting the war in Iraq, which anyone objectively can look at and say, this was a disaster. This was not a good outcome. We've been in perpetual war for 18, 19 years now. and it has been a drain on the economy, et cetera, et cetera. But our book of discipline says that Christian war, it says that war is incompatible with Christian teaching. It's the same phrasing it uses for homosexuality. But everyone voted to support, they rejected the resolution saying that we were apologizing or repudiating the 2006 resolution supporting war. So we don't really care about war. Yeah. We don't really care about, another one was the environment. We don't really care about the environment. We don't really care about a lot of things that our discipline says we should care about. And so what I was trying to illustrate, especially for so many of my Methodist colleagues who I love, who feel like if we just wouldn't talk about all these other issues, if we just talk about Jesus, everything would be fine. No, it's not going to be fine. So some of the statistics I laid out there were 2/3 of white evangelicals don't believe in climate change. Two-thirds don't believe it's a problem, I should say. And it's changed a little bit. It's actually gotten better over the last few years. We got 2 hurricanes in the Gulf. The whole West is on fire. Last year, Australia burned. And people are looking at this, everything's fine. There's no problem. And you talked about politicization. The EPA started under Nixon. Yeah. Like the Environmental Protection Agency started under a Republican administration. Yes. Because conservatives used to believe in conserving things.
Disparage conservatives.
No, absolutely not.
And at the same time, it seems that as a society as a whole, we are so money driven.
Yeah.
We have been created, or we have been programmed to be so money driven that we've forgotten about life. Period. One of my dearest mentors, and I call her my mother in the environmental justice movement. She says, "What's the living wage if it brings disease and death?"
Yes, right.
You know, and in other words, what good is it for us to have money and the luxuries of life if on the back end of it you're gonna die?
Right. Yeah.
You know, or you're gonna kill. You know, and I don't know that we think about it. I don't know as people of faith, but in particular Christians, in my experience, I don't know that we have a real understanding of life.
Right. Yeah.
And how, and not just life, but how the Creator sees life. You know, how Spirit sees life. So we're talking about the valuing of life and how as a society we've kind of lost that. And I was headed toward telling you that I believe it's centered in capitalism. That loss has been centered in capitalism. And when we move from this agricultural place to this industrial place, capitalism took over and it saturated everything.
Right.
And even when we look at our institutions of religion, you know, they're based on capitalist models.
They definitely are.
But our relationships are based on capitalist models, and especially our relationship with the planet. We are more extractive than we are regenerative. But you've got big plans, and you are doing a lot of work. One of the other things that we've done is we went into a graveyard and dug some holes to put some trees in instead of people.
Right.
And I thought that was just amazing. You want to talk about just any of that, or just talk about how your relationship with the planet is, and how you derive to that place and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. Well, so you were talking about capitalism. I think, and this shift from agrarian to industrial, I was thinking about the Sabbath, just the whole concept of Sabbath. The whole idea is from the Hebrews. You know, they escaped from slavery, so one of their first laws is everyone gets a day off. Yeah. And that's because life is about more than work. And what happens with capitalism, what's happening in our culture is, you've got people working 2, 3, 4 part-time jobs to try to make ends meet, and they have no time to live. And what's rooted in the Hebrew Scriptures is life is about more than work. You cannot work your donkey to death. You cannot work your employees to death. You shouldn't work yourself to death. And that's completely gone. Now the whole thing is, if you don't work, you deserve to die. Like if you don't work, you don't deserve health care. If you don't have, you know, oh, your job doesn't pay enough for you to own this house, work 2 jobs. And that's the mode. And I think it's appalling that we would tell someone, if you don't work, you should die. Yeah. But you're right. It's exactly that same. If it's not useful to me as the investor, as the so-called job creator, then you deserve to die. And I look at these trees and I see them as board feet. You know, so their only utility is, how can I turn them into something?
Right.
And I'm not aware of the fact that they, right now, not only are they producing the oxygen for me,
yep,
they are producing pheromones that stimulate my immune system.
Yeah.
So the Japanese did this study that found out that just walking among trees makes your immune system better. Oh, we know that there's bacteria in the soil. If you dig your hands in the soil, you actually get a dopamine boost because of the chemicals the bacteria in the soil produce. So gardening makes you happier. There's a reason for that. God made us for the planet.
Yeah.
And the conservative values that I grew up with, which were about those relationships. You should love the land. Like the land was important.
Yes.
You should have this intimate relationship with gardening, canning. You know, this self-sufficiency stuff that we now hear. It's funny because either, you know, you've got doomsday preppers, and you have people who are you know, crunchy environmentalists, have the same notion. We need to get back to that intimate relationship, because these trees are more than board feet.
Yeah.
They're more than building materials for the next subdivision.
Yeah.
And so it's that valuing of life. To me, that's conservative.
Yeah.
I want to conserve things. I want to say no to things that harm life.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's where the EPA came from. I mean, that's where I feel like when we talk about traditions and family values and being conservative, to me, that's what that means.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when you brought up the EPA and looking at our current administration and all of the rollbacks and this blatant declaration of war on the EPA.
Yeah.
We don't understand as a society that the EPA is our environmental protection.
Right. Yeah.
Environmental protection agency.
Right.
So in all actuality, the war that has been declared on your protections.
Yeah. On your breathable air.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything that they strip away, they're stripping away your protections. I don't understand how we aren't all up in arms at having our protections taken away.
Yeah. Yeah. Or how many Alabama fishermen and hunters should be outraged about these rollbacks on environmental protection.
Yes.
You can't eat the fish you catch in the streams.
Yes. But I mean, Alabama, the beauty of Alabama, part of the beauty of Alabama is how biodiverse Alabama actually is.
Yes.
And how you get different species of different, variety of species of different things in Alabama. And again, these protections being taken away are taking away this beauty.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And our ability to make a life or to have a good life on the land.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But looking at that, I mean, part of what we've been robbed because of white supremacist, patriarchal understandings of life and the promotion thereof, part of what we've lost is the stories and the engagement of others.
Right.
And my African roots, as well as my indigenous brothers and sisters, would tell you that we are to have a relationship with the land.
Yeah.
We are supposed to have a relationship with the trees. We are supposed to have a relationship with the various species. And it's not supposed to be a thing of us hoarding everything and being greedy about everything, but us actually having a relationship with. And if you have a relationship with, you won't abuse, you won't misuse, you won't mistreat if you have this relationship. And I think part of our job as faith leaders is to bring people back to a place of having that relationship. Yeah.
Well, when you read the Bible, one of the things that hits me so often is that there are all these agrarian and nature metaphors. You read like the 30 and 31st chapter of Job, where God is like, look, I'm taking care of the deer on the sides of the mountains. Like, who's sending the snow onto the mountains and the rain in the desert so that these flowers bloom once every 7 years? You never see it, but I see it. And when you read that, there is such a sense of wealth. Like I mean, we're here. You can look around. You are part of all this, and that's wealth.
Yeah.
It's not. iPhones are not wealth.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
They're gonna break, and you're gonna replace it and whatever. This is wealth.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a mind shift.
I'm heavy on ownership. I believe that you should own your own. However, I also understand that there's a conflict with ownership, and we can't own land.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
it owns us.
Right. You can't own land. You can't own the wind. You can't own the sun. You can't own water. You can't. For some reason, we think that there are commodities that we can actually own. This is my land. No, this ain't your land.
Right.
You know, you leave, the land still gonna be here. How's yours?
Yes. Right.
The land takes care of us, not the other way around.
Yeah.
We somehow in our theological understanding as Christians, and I even say in many faith understandings, we have this understanding that we're somehow lords over everything, and everything is our subject, and it's designed to serve us. But that's not the way that it's designed.
Right. Yeah.
We actually pretty low on totem pole.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know? So that mentality. In fact, let me ask you, why do you think that it is that the church, in particular, has not addressed that understanding?
Mainly because it doesn't want to offend people with money. Like if you're the church,
Whoa.
and you are, you start preaching environmentalism, or you start preaching, responsible stewardship of the land, then, who's the mine operator going to give their tithe to, or who's and so much of it is built around this exploitive, extractive economy.
Yeah.
Don't make the money holders angry.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. Again, what's a living wage if it brings death and disease?
Yeah.
What good is it to have a house if the land on it is deteriorating?
Right. Or it's polluted and you get cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't even live off the land that you live in, or your house is on, because of the pollution and the degradation of the soil.
Yeah.
What good is it to have this house? Because at the end of the day, if you've got a house that you can't actually be sustained on, then all you got is a big old storage.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
You know.
Well, and I like the metaphor of the house. So one of the things I talk about in house churches is the Greek word for house is oikos. It's where we get the word for ecology, and it's also where we get the word for economics. That all these things are related. So how we run our household, how we take care of the environment, and how we as a society deal with our economic structures, how we take care of the poor, all of that's about household management, It's about the oikos. And I just feel like there's a reason we're having a crisis in all three of these things.
Yeah. I agree. So as we get ready to close out, what are you up to these days? What's been going on in your world and happening that we could actually get involved in?
Well, so one of the things, I've actually just released a book. It's called Church Comes Home. It's about how to start a house church, or how to create a house church network, or it's kind of our experience and my own perspective. So that's coming out in the next week or two. Continuing to help people understand how to do house churches, and I think connecting the house churches to environmental concerns, to tree planting. You were mentioning tree planting earlier. That's one of the things that I feel like anyone can do, and it's something you can do in the middle of a pandemic. So fall and spring are the best time to plant trees because you don't have to water them as much. So if we're going to be doing a tree planting again in the fall, if you're in Birmingham and you would like to be part of that, please reach out. My email is dave@stjunia.org, spelled out SAINTJUNIA.
Okay.
Those are my big things right now, thinking about how, especially in the midst of this pandemic, how we can continue to do grassroots ministry in homes and in our neighborhoods.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for conversing with us. Listen, as always, today we offer to you love, peace, and light.